Hello, and welcome back to Introduction to Genetics and Evolution. In this video, I'll be talking about some basic processes for getting genetic material into new cells. So the two processes I'll be emphasizing in this mini video are mitosis and meiosis. I'm not going to talk about these in extensive detail. There's a lot of molecular parts to it, there's a lot of stages to it that I'm not really going to emphasize. I mostly just want you to understand these in the context of ploidy. Ploidy refers to the number of complete copies of genetic information in your cells. So you may remember in a previous video I referred to most animals being diploid, diploid. That di stands for 2. So most animals, just like you, have 2 copies of the complete genetic code in their cells. One that came from mom, one that came from dad, and that's why you're diploid. So let's talk about these two processes in the context of ploidy. The first process we'll discuss briefly is mitosis. Mitosis happens when you have the division of cells into 2 cells that are genetically identical to each other and to the parent cell that gave rise to them. So again, this is a process that produces 2 diploid daughter cells genetically identical to a single parent diploid cell. This happens inside your body all the time. When you're growing new skin cells, the genetic material is passed from the old cells into these new cells through the process of mitosis. So this is essential all the time through growth and development. Now, this also presumes that if you have no new mutations, we'll come back to this in just a second, if you have no new mutations, basically every cell in your body should be identical to the original fertilized egg that you were. So if you go back way back in time when you were originally one new fertilized egg, the genetic information in there, if it was not altered, would be true in all your current cells today. So let me ask the question, what would happen if we did have a mutation during mitosis? A mutation is a change in the genetic code. What would happen if that happened sometime during mitosis? Let's say when you were at the 16 cell stage, if one of the cells suddenly had some error in the genetic code where something changed moving on there. What would happen is you'd produce what's referred to as a genetic mosaic. And this shows you a picture of a flower that is a genetic mosaic, where there was a genetic change that happened in the cells leading to this half of the flower relative to those leading to that half of the flower. So there are different cells here that have a change in the genetic code from the others. Now, mutations in mitosis control genes have been known to be associated with various cancers. So this is often a very bad thing when it happens. So let's talk about the other process of splitting genetic information. Let's talk about meiosis. Meiosis, in contrast to mitosis, it produces haploid, or one genetic copy, daughter cells, from a parent diploid cell. Okay? So this is typically associated with the formation of gametes, such as when you are making sperm or eggs in your body. So you start off with all your cells having 2 copies of all genetic information, but then you basically lose one copy that then gets, and the other copy is what goes into your gametes. This is typically the precursor to fertilization. This is what allows it such that when you have kids, they also have 2 copies. Now, fertilization is what brings together the gametes of 2 parents into an offspring. So you have these single copies, these 1N meiotic gametes, coming together to make a new 2N, having 2 copies, diploid cell, which would be you, for example, or your kid. Now again, half the genetic material is from mom, half is from the dad. So we have this sort of union. And this picture diagrams it pretty well. Imagine this is a complement of chromosomes from dad. Here's a complement of chromosomes from mom. And you see that in the offspring, they have 2 copies of the blue, 2 copies of the red, 2 copies of the green, etc. Now, what would happen if you got 2 copies of a chromosome from one parent and then got a 3rd copy from the other? What would happen if it didn't split up as much as it should? Well, the answer is not very good. You typically end up with some sort of fairly extreme disease. One of the most minor of these would be Down syndrome. This is when you have 3 copies of chromosome 21. Others are Klinefelter syndrome, etc. Often when this happens, the offspring is inviable and never makes it past a couple of cells large. Now let me give you a fictional example, and then I'll ask you a question after that to see if you've understood what I've said so far. Let's imagine that you're messing with your microwave. Microwaves are not as dangerous as I'm going to portray this to be. Let's say you're messing with this microwave. A lightning bolt strikes your house, and all of a sudden this big bolt of radiation shoots out of the microwave onto your face, and you grow a third eye. This would never actually happen. But let's say the cells in your face were affected. Now, these cells that have been changed in some way, would these cells spread by mitosis? Remember, they're in your head. Were they spread by mitosis? Could they spread by meiosis? And would you be likely to pass on the affected cells to your offspring or not? So I'm going to ask you these three questions, and we'll see if you understood from that. Well, welcome back. I hope you understood the answers to those questions. The answers, let me just briefly go over them. They could certainly spread by mitosis. Because again, mitosis is just what happens when your cells are making new copies of other cells. You're going 2N to 2N. In your head, you're probably replacing skin cells all the time, and they're making new ones. And if there's a mutated cell here, it might spread to other spots on your forehead right there. It is very improbable these cells would spread by meiosis because you're not usually making gametes in your head. You may think you are, but you're not. And because of that, it's also very unlikely you would ever pass on the affected cells to your offspring. Okay? So let's just recap real quick what's happening. So with mitosis, again, this is the process that's typically associated with just growth within your body. You start off in this fictional example here. There's only a single chromosome, but there's two copies of it. This is one that came from dad. There's one that came from mom. Before it actually replicates, before it actually passes on to the new cell, there is a period of replication. So you actually go through a very short 4N stage where you actually have 4 copies of everything, 2 from dad, 2 from mom. The 2 copies that are there, these are called chromatids. They are identical. It's just 2 copies of your mom's single copy, 2 copies of your dad's single copy. And eventually you get down to these daughter cells that are just like your original cell. These are identical to the original ones there. We have 1 copy of your dad's genes, 1 copy of your mom's genes. And it's just passed on over and over again. So mitosis, you start at 2N, you end at 2N, and you have exactly the same genetic complement in the beginning as in the end, assuming there's no new mutation. With meiosis, this is what's typically associated with gamete formation. Again, you start with this 2N, you start with the same 2N part, but here in this case, you actually produce 1N copies. So you are actually passing on only half of your genetic information to your kids. You're not passing on all the genetic information. And this works out such that the kid in the end has 2 copies because it has the one that came from you and it has the one that came from your partner. So 2N to 1N is what you typically see with meiosis. Now this is an important part. Meiosis is fundamental to understanding inheritance. So this is what we're going to focus on for most of the rest of the lecture. I hope you'll join us. Thank you.